Hey, what's up guys? Jake with Legacy 4x4 here again, and we're going to do a quick little fun fabrication project because if you guys saw last week on the Bronco video, I have a bunch of like random parts that I don't need for anything, and instead of just throwing them away or trying to sell them for pennies, I figured I'm going to try to make something kind of cool out of them. So some of you guys might have seen the crankshaft stool that I have on the other side of the welding table there. That was a gift my dad got me, but I don't see any reason why I can't make one of those myself. So I have a couple of these, I think they're add-a-leafs out of something, but I've got two of these. I've got two of these big springs, and I'm gonna see if I can make a kind of cool shop chair out of these kind of things. So it's just a fun, random little project, just something I'm working on, just killing time over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend here. So I'm gonna cut these first and try to make the base. And then I've also got these little bearings. I'm pretty sure these were for the Commando, one of the sets of spare parts of stuff that I have. I don't need them, the Commando's bearings are good. And so I'm gonna reuse these bearings, I'm gonna use these add-a-leafs, I'm gonna use this spring, I'll buy a piece of wood, and I'm gonna see if I can make a chair. Anyways, let's go and get started. All right, so the first thing I gotta do is cut one of these add-a-leafs down. So I don't wanna stack the two add-a-leafs on top of each other because it's gonna make it not flat and not sit on the ground properly. So instead, I will cut one of them down and then I will put them together and just butt weld the sides of it, which should be pretty, straightforward and simple. This is a very old blade that's on this saw right now. I'm sure it's gonna get through this just fine, but I wouldn't be surprised if I dull the hell out of this blade right now trying to cut through, because this is all solid steel. Obviously it's a suspension component, so it's probably going to dull through this blade, but we'll see if the slugger can make its way through two of these cuts. All right. One thing with the slugger, the one downside is they're loud. They're extremely loud, and they throw out chunks of steel as they cut, so eye protection, hearing protection, definitely necessary if you're using a cold cut metal chop saw like this, especially inside an enclosed garage like I am. So let's go and get cutting. All right, so it did cut through it, but that was real time as you guys saw there, so it's hot. It was mostly a friction cut, not a clean cut, but it did make it through it. It's perfectly flat and smooth, and it's a really clean cut. It's just not the way the saw is supposed to work. So if you're wondering, the slugger can cut through an add-a-leaf, just not very well. All right, so this time I'm gonna try it standing vertically. I couldn't do it on the last one because of the concave in it, but because I've got a shorter piece of it now, I should be able to cut through it vertically, which the saw generally does prefer. So we'll give it this a shot and see if it's any different. All right, that was objectively a little bit faster and a little bit easier to do, but same kind of result, still burned its way through it. That blade is definitely toasted now, but it's okay, it was on its way out anyways. I've been using that blade for about 6 or 7 months now, so that blade was about toasted anyways. Fortunately, I keep a whole stack of spare ones. But anyways, we got our added leaves cut, so let's go lay it out on the table. All right, so that's the basic idea. Obviously, I'll have all 4 points. I've got to grind these off so that I can weld them. So I'm going to grind them off, and then it looks like I'm going to have to hold it with my hand and then tack weld it into place. So I'm going to clean these off with the grinder real quick, and then we'll tack weld these on. So that's kind of the basic idea. I'll have to do something for the bearing to sit down there, but this is the basic idea of how I want this to look. Pretty simple, kind of cool. Anyways, let's figure out how the bearing's gonna go on here. Alright, so as you can see, I should be able to just weld the bearing seat straight to this lower piece and then drop the bearing into the place there. So I'll have to figure out how I'm going to attach this part of the bearing to the spring, but I can do that here in a few minutes. For now, I know that the bearing base can sit here. Now I also got to figure out if I'm going to do something to pin this bearing together. Fortunately, there's already a huge hole through here, so most likely the easiest thing to do is going to be to build a plate on top of this with a matching hole in the center of it so that I can drop the bearing into place and then put a screw through it on the bottom there to hold the seat, hold the upper portion of the seat into place. So that's probably gonna be what I do there, but for now I can definitely just install this bearing, the bearing seat right here onto this. I'm gonna weld it up again. Gonna have to turn the welder down a little bit, but with a full bead around the outside of it, it should hold just fine. So let's get on to that part. So we got the bearing installed. Next, I will have to make a plate for this with a screw hole through it so I can do a nut and a bolt on it and hold it into place to keep the chair where it's supposed to be. But we'll get to that here in a minute. I gotta see if I have some casters and figure out how I want to do the wheels on this thing. So let me see what I got. Alright, so I didn't record all of this because I didn't really know what I was doing, so I was just kind of making it up as I went. But you can see I've got the casters in place. These are just little 100-pound casters. You can get them at Lowe's for like $5 or so a piece. They're all cast iron, which will fit with the rest of the vibe of this chair. And I've got the bearing installed. And so I didn't record this because I definitely didn't know what I was doing with that. But basically, and it's still really hot right now, but basically you see there's that normal wheel bearing type thing that you get from any vehicle. I have a bunch of them, so I'm using one of them for this. I made a flat plate out of some 1/8 inch spare stock that I had, and I threw a bolt through it, and then I tack welded the bolt onto the bottom. So the point of doing that is basically so that the bearing and this plate spin freely in here. As you can see, it rotates freely, so they're not tight, not held down by anything, but they're spinning on the bearing and they're not spinning on the nut itself, because those nuts would eventually back out and they'd fall apart and the chair would fall over. So that's what we did for that. It'll hold it in place. This is just a 1/4 inch bolt, then like I said, it's tack welded on the bottom. So now what we got to do is get this spring on top of here. So I just ground down the bottom of the spring a little bit to give me a flat plate to weld onto, and that's generally what this is going to look like right here. So I'm going to weld all of this onto here, make this nice and sturdy, right about there, and then we got to come up and do whatever we're going to do for the seat itself. So spring, plate, you can see how that works. So let's go ahead and weld up this bottom plate here, and then we'll move on to making the seat. I'm not a huge fan of that wobble that it's got. I'm going to keep playing around with it and see if I can strengthen that up a little bit, but if I can't, what I'll do is I'll just put a piece of plate down here and I'll just fix weld this thing into place and basically make the bearing useless, but that's okay because I really am not a fan of how much wiggle that has. So I gotta look at that a little bit more. But we'll make the seat first and then we'll sit on it and see if it's bad. Then I will come back through and fix that into place. Okay, so continuing along with the I have no idea what I'm doing theme, I got some of this little piece of, whatever this is, this, semi-galvanized plated stuff. You can buy it at Lowe's that has a bunch of holes in it, as well as a 15-inch seat topper that's meant for like bar stools and stuff. I was originally not sure I wanted it to be this big, but when I sized it up with the stool the way it is, with how wide the legs are, this actually fit really nicely, really proportionally. Anyways, to attach this, I've got it sitting on the welding table so that it's all perfectly flat. And I had a few of these like black large head wood screws. And so I'm going to use these. I'm just going to drill through all these holes here, just drill this thing into the side of it. And it should give it a nice cool little like black, accent piece on here, and then I'll stain the wood afterwards. Anyways, so it's pretty simple. This stuff is really flexible, so you can literally just bend it by hand, just hold it into place. Easy as that. Now, to the part where the two ends meet, I will just run a weld bead along this here in a second. So once I get this all put down and flat and flush, then I'll just run a weld bead on it and smooth it out with the grinder. So let's go ahead and just finish this. I'm gonna turn the music back on, and we're just gonna screw all of these pieces in and make a nice little seat topper for this thing. It'll look a little something like this. So here's the first of these two chairs. As you can see, this one's finished. This is the one that's made mostly out of scrap. I am going to make another one with that other spring, and I'm going to do more like deliberate planning on stuff like that. So instead of just being a whole bunch of scrap random pieces, it'll be a little bit more deliberate. Use some actual real materials that I have, stuff like that. Anyways, you can see I did put through 4 pieces of rebar around the spring itself, welded into the add leaves down here at the bottom. The spring is not strong enough by itself to hold up the weight. It wants to obviously be a spring and bounce around. So I did basically delete the bearing. I welded it all together, put these on it. These are tied into the leaves on the ground here. and then weld it along the spring to give it a lot of retention so that it doesn't wiggle around or anything. So this chair doesn't spin. It probably won't make the other chair spin either. There's really not much of a need. So we've got this one done. I'm gonna put this on the ground, take some pictures of it, and then I will probably start to work on the other one here in a second. All right, so for the second chair, I'm gonna make this one out of DOM because I happen to have 3 feet of it just sitting on my little rack over there, and I'm trying to get rid of some of the scrap I have, and I'm trying not to go buy anything new. So what I did is I cut out a 2-foot section of it, and then I had one little 12-inch piece of it, and then I cut out that remaining 12-inch piece there, did 2 quick little notches in it, and that's gonna be the base of it. So I'm just gonna do a super simple cross, and that's gonna be the base of it. And then I've got this other piece of DOM here, which this is actually a 2-inch quarter wall. This is old control arm leftovers that I've had literally in the shop for years that I have no use for. And I'm gonna use this to make the main frame for the spring itself. So instead of doing rebar on the outside, I'm gonna do this piece of DOM on the inside, and I'm gonna weld the top of the spring to the top of this. This is gonna get welded to the base, and that should make an extremely strong center point base for this to mount onto. So we're gonna do it like that. Anyways, let's lay this out and tack this up and fully weld it. So here are the 2 chairs you can see sitting here. On the newest one, I did not do the little skirt around the piece of wood because I didn't have enough of those black large head cap screws. So I don't have the stuff to put that skirt on. If I go to Lowe's tomorrow, I'll buy some and put them on it, but if not, it's not that big of a deal. It's just aesthetic anyways. But yeah, so this is how those turned out. I think I like this one a little bit better. It's definitely a lot sturdier because it was all made out of, fresh new material, versus this one being all made out of, old, previous reused stuff, recycled, not quite as sturdy as that one feels, but they're both chairs, they both do what they're supposed to do. Anyways, I'm super happy with how each of these chairs turned out. Like I said, this was just a fun little weekend project using some of that scrap material out of the Bronco. So I hope you guys like this video. Next week, we're either going to be working on the Commando or working on the Bronco, one of the 2 of those. So make sure you guys tune in next week for the next video with one of the other 2 trucks. But I hope you guys like this fun little shop project. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.